and from the sounds on the phone, it appeared that an attack was taking place right then.
Are pets our best friends, or just a beast in disguise, waiting to turn into uncontrollable savages?
We got 27 good. Whoa!
If your answer is the former, these terrifying stories of pet owners being ravaged by their best pals might change your mind. Attacked in their homes brutally, these animal-loving individuals had no idea what their passion could lead to. Join us as we reveal unbelievable pets who ate their owners right in front of everyone. Number 18, the monkey attack. Monkeys might seem adorable and fun, but every so often, they can unleash a surprising side. Nga Muhammad, a 72-year-old man from Malaysia, had a special bond with his pet monkey, who was more than just a companion. They worked as a team. Nga would handle things on the ground while his monkey scurried up coconut trees to help him gather fruit. On one of these routine days, Nga promised his 29-year-old son Zachariah that he'd bring back some coconuts. So, as usual, he sent his monkey up the tree to fetch them. But what started as a normal day took a dark turn. Without warning, the monkey attacked. It bit into Nga's arm, rupturing an artery, and tragically, he didn't make it. Zachariah, concerned by his father's absence, went looking for him, only to find his father's body and an aggressive monkey that nearly turned on him as well. Zachariah shared with local news that the family had bought the monkey while it was still young, hoping it would help by climbing the coconut tree behind their house to pick coconuts. Speaking from Sultana Nur Zahira Hospital, he recalled, "I was at home when it happened. After a while, I thought it was strange because everything was so quiet. I didn't hear my father, there were no coconuts falling, and there wasn't a sound from the monkey. When he reached the spot, Zachariah was horrified to find his father lying motionless on the ground, his body cold, and his right hand bleeding. The monkey was nearby. The man who rushed to help, 36-year-old Moed Azman Moed Yusuf, said he had run over after hearing screams. Realizing that the older man had already passed away, he assisted Zachariah in getting back to their home. He then called the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, who arrived to tranquilize and capture the monkey. Officials later decided to rehabilitate the animal and release it into the wild, ending a relationship that had gone horribly wrong. Number 17, the heartbreaking cat tragedy. Pets are often a source of comfort, but they can also be a tragic reminder of the isolation some people face. Janet Veal, a woman who spent most of her time with her beloved cats and dogs after her husband left, had cut herself off from much of the world. At the age of 56, she had no friends around. When neighbors noticed her mailbox filling up with unanswered mail, they called the police for a welfare check, worried something had gone terribly wrong. Inside the home, authorities found a heartbreaking sight. Several animals, including a cat and a dog, lay dead in the kitchen and living room, though some others had survived. Reports indicated that the starving animals, left without food for an extended period, had begun to eat their owner out of desperation. Officer Dave Ivey described the house as unventilated for weeks, with the floor completely obscured by piles of rubbish. The court was told that Janet Veal had led a reclusive life and had become estranged from her husband. Recording a verdict of death by natural causes, Coroner Keith Wiseman noted, "The officer believed the animals had been confined to these 2 rooms downstairs for what seemed to be several weeks, possibly stretching into months. Janet had passed away, likely from natural causes, but her body had been left alone for weeks, and her hungry cats, desperate for food, had done the unimaginable to survive." It was also confirmed that Janet wasn't attacked by her pets while she was alive. Number 16, the tiger in Harlem. In a story that sounds too wild to be true, Antoine Yates kept a Siberian Bengal tiger named Ming in his Harlem apartment. Driven by his love for big cats, Yates chose to raise Ming in his high-rise home, a decision that would come back to bite him, literally. In April 2000, Yates, a 31-year-old part-time cab driver, made a bold purchase. He acquired an 8-week-old Siberian Bengal tiger hybrid named Ming from Bearcat Hollow Animal Park in Racine, Minnesota. Records showed Bearcat Hollow had previously sold him a lion cub, which Yates later rehomed. For 5 years, he and his animals lived together in apartment 5E of the Drew Hamilton Houses, a public housing complex. During that time, Yates would only leave his apartment once daily for about an hour to buy food. When Yates turned up in the emergency room with severe arm wounds in 2003, he claimed a Pitbull was to blame. However, doctors knew these injuries were far too serious for any regular dog. It turned out that Ming had attacked him after Yates tried to break up a scuffle between the tiger and another animal. When authorities arrived at Yates's place, they found a tense Ming prowling inside. It took tranquilizers to safely remove the tiger from the apartment. Despite the incident, Yates insisted Ming had only reacted out of fear. Authorities relocated Ming to a sanctuary in Ohio, where the tiger finally found peace until his natural death years later. In a 2020 interview, Yates shared that his first animal was a lion cub named Jabba, who passed away young. After Jabba, he bought Ming and another lion cub, Nemo, who came at a discounted price because he was sick and not expected to live long. At the time, Yates also owned an alligator named Al, which he had legally obtained in New Jersey. Unlike typical pet owners, Yates took pride in not domesticating his animals, describing himself as a drill sergeant focused on keeping their natural instincts intact. For his actions, Yates served a 3-month sentence on Rikers Island for reckless endangerment. According to the New York Times, he currently lives in Pennsylvania with his mother. Number 15. The Tale of Scarface, the Pitbull. Pitbulls carry a reputation for being aggressive, and sadly, in the case of Scarface, it turned out tragically true. Brenda and Ishmael Guerrero had rescued Scarface and were committed to helping him adjust to a new life. But one day, when Brenda tried to put a sweater on him but Scarface wasn't pleased, the dog turned into a beast, fully living up to his fierce name as he launched a brutal attack on Brenda, showing the relentless violence of Tony Montana from Scarface. Determined and unyielding, the dog fought back against every attempt to restrain him. Ismael desperately tried to pull him off Brenda, but his efforts fell short. Their son, Antoine Harris, then grabbed a knife, attempting to stop the dog by stabbing him in the head, yet even that failed to deter him. When police arrived, they too struggled to get the aggressive dog under control. Officers responding said the dog was pretty aggressive, shared Tampa police officer Eddie Durkin. The dog even managed to shake off the effects of a taser, wrenching free from the prongs as it continued resisting. Finally, animal control stepped in with a tranquilizer gun and a beanbag gun to subdue the animal. Using a catch pole with a secure loop around the dog's neck, they were finally able to restrain him. Brenda was rushed to Tampa General Hospital, suffering severe bites on her arm, but was reported to be in stable condition. There's been no official word on the dog's fate yet, but one thing's certain: he won't be forced into a cute sweater anytime soon. Number 14. The Survival Instinct of Harry and Sally. Harry and Sally, a pair of pugs from Omaha, were beloved pets to their owner, who lived alone. But after their owner tragically took his own life, they were left stranded in the house without food. Days stretched into weeks, and in desperation, the two pugs did what they had to in order to survive. They started to feed on their dead owner. When worried neighbors noticed the owner's prolonged absence, they contacted the police, who discovered the heart-wrenching scene. Harry and Sally were rescued by the authorities and later placed with the Nebraska Humane Society. The pugs were up for adoption, but anyone who knew their story didn't want them. Thankfully, a compassionate couple from Indiana adopted them, giving the pugs a chance to start fresh in a loving home. The police also confirmed that Harry and Sally are perfectly non-violent pups, and they only fed on their former owner to survive. Number 13. The Black Widow's Bite. Mark Vogel, a 30-year-old from Germany, had an unusual hobby. He was captivated by arachnids. He had amassed over 200 spiders and insects, including a deadly black widow. For years, Mark's friends and family had warned him against his dangerous habit, yet he was relentless. Eventually, his loved ones drifted away, and Mark was left alone with his dangerous pets, claiming that they don't do him any harm, until one day, his passion turned lethal. A black widow bit Mark, and with no one around to help, the venom eventually claimed his life. Months later, neighbors raised the alarm, leading authorities to his home. Inside, they found his decomposed body, along with his many insects and spiders, which had started to feed on him in their desperation. The spiders were eventually moved to a conservation area, but the grim news left everyone terrified and unsettled. In particular, policemen who discovered Mark's body couldn't believe their eyes. "Spiders were crawling all over his body," said a police spokesperson, describing the unsettling scene. "They were emerging from his nose and mouth. Larger chunks of flesh had been torn away by lizards, carried back to the webs of tarantulas and other large bird-eating spiders." The officer painted a vivid picture of the small apartment in Dortmund, Germany. Open cages and terrariums scattered everywhere, all bathed in an eerie green glow. "It was horrific," the spokesperson added. Police described Mark's apartment as a disturbing mix between a botanical garden and the butterfly breeding room from The Silence of the Lambs. Number 12. The chimp tragedy with Travis. Travis the chimpanzee was more than a pet to Sandra and Jerome Harold. He was treated like family, especially after Jerome's death. Sandra often overlooked Travis's unpredictable side, but that all changed one day. On February 16, 2009, around 3:40 in the afternoon, Travis launched a brutal attack on Sandra's friend, Charla Nash, who was 55 at the time. It all started after Travis somehow got out of the house with Sandra's car keys. Charla, wanting to help, arrived to try and coax him back inside, but things took a dark turn. Seeing Charla holding an Elmo doll, one of his favorite toys, seemed to set him off, and he went into a terrifying rage. Although Travis knew Charla, who'd worked with Sandra and Jerome at their towing business, the fact that she looked different with a new hairstyle and unfamiliar car may have confused or unsettled him. To keep Travis calm, Sandra had given him some tea laced with Xanax. He was also taking medications for Lyme disease, yet none of this could stop the fury. As the attack escalated, Sandra frantically tried to intervene, hitting him with a shovel and even stabbing him with a butcher knife. Reflecting on the horror, she later said, "For me to do something like that, put a knife in him, was like putting one in myself." She remembered Travis turning to her as if in shock, as if he were asking, "Mom, what did you do?" At that point, Sandra thought Charla was dead. She rushed to her car, locked herself inside, and made a desperate call to 911. Travis's screams could be heard in the background, but the call taker initially thought it was a prank, until Sandra cried, "He's eating her!" Emergency responders held back until the police arrived, ready to take control of the situation. When the officers showed up, Travis charged toward their vehicle, even trying to open the locked passenger door and smashing a side view mirror. He moved around to the driver's side, managing to open that door, which is when Officer Frank Chiafari fired 4 shots at him. Injured, Travis retreated back into the house, where police later found him lying lifeless next to his cage. Charla survived, but her injuries were severe, leading to a life-changing recovery that included a face transplant. Today, Charla speaks out for stricter regulations on exotic pet ownership. Number 11. Marius' deadly encounter with Humphrey the Hippo. Marius Els, a retired Army major, had an unbreakable bond with a hippo named Humphrey, whom he'd raised despite numerous warnings about Hippo's aggressive tendencies. Humphrey's temper showed itself on occasion, but Marius trusted his tame hippo completely. Sadly, one day, Humphrey's aggression flared up without warning. He dragged Marius into a river, fatally injuring him in the process. Marius's lifeless body was discovered submerged in the same river where years earlier he had rescued Humphrey the hippo during a flood. Another family had originally taken in Humphrey, but once he grew too large, Marius adopted him at 5 months old. The young hippo became part of life on Elsa's sprawling 400-acre farm, even learning to swim alongside humans. A year before the attack, a photo showed Marius riding on the hippo's back, speaking warmly about their unique bond. "Humphrey's like a son to me. He's just like a human," he'd said. "People don't get it. They think you can only connect with pets like dogs and cats, but I have a relationship with the most dangerous animal in Africa." Despite Marius's affection for Humphrey, his wife Louise, who worked as a pharmacist, had always voiced her concerns. There had been close calls before. Earlier in the year, South African media reported that a 52-year-old man and his 7-year-old grandson were forced to climb a tree for safety after Humphrey chased them while they were canoeing on the river. Marius had to lure the hippo away with an apple so paramedics could rescue the pair. Humphrey had also caused trouble around the farm. The hippo was blamed for killing calves that belonged to Marius's business partner and frequently managed to break out of his enclosure, even causing scenes by chasing golfers at a nearby golf club. Number 10. The deadly bear incident. Kellyanne Walds, an animal lover through and through, even had a black bear among her pets. As per the reports, the bear belonged to her husband, Michael Walds, who was dealing with exotic animals with an expired license. Though the captive black bear was kept in a cage, one fateful day, Kelly entered to clean up, and the bear attacked her in full view of her horrified neighbors. Kelly, who was 37 years old, was declared dead at the scene, as confirmed by Tim Conway, an information and education supervisor with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Michael Waltz had let his license to keep and sell exotic animals expire in June of 2008, which Conway referred to as a mere technicality. Having been licensed since 1994, Waltz had reported to authorities in 2007 that he was housing a lion, cougar, jaguar, tiger, black bear, leopard, and 2 servals on his property in Ross Township, a rural area located in the Poconos Mountains, roughly 20 miles northeast of Allentown. On that fateful Sunday, Kellyanne Waltz entered the bear's steel and concrete cage, which measured 15 by 15 feet, around 5 in the evening. She attempted to distract the bear by throwing a shovel full of dog food to one side while she cleaned the opposite side. Unfortunately, at some point during this process, the bear turned on her and launched an attack. Later, the culprit was confiscated by the authorities. Number 9. The fatal encounter of Timothy Treadwell with a grizzly. Timothy Treadwell was known for his unusual dedication to living alongside grizzly bears in Alaska's Katmai National Park. In 2003, he and his girlfriend Arnie Huguenard camped in the park to study the bears up close, but the story took a deadly turn when a bear attacked, leaving no survivors. Around noon on Sunday, October 5, 2003, Timothy Treadwell spoke with an associate in Malibu, California, by satellite phone. Treadwell mentioned no problems with any bears. The next day, October 6th, Willie Fulton, a Kodiak air taxi pilot, arrived at Treadwell and Huguenard's campsite to pick them up, but found the area abandoned, except for a bear, and contacted the local park rangers. The couple's mangled remains were discovered quickly upon investigation. Treadwell's disfigured head, partial spine, right forearm and hand, with his wristwatch still on, were recovered a short distance from the camp. Huguenard's partial remains were found next to the torn and collapsed tents, partially buried in a mound of twigs and soil. A large male bear, tagged Bear 141, protecting the campsite, was unalived by park rangers during their attempt to retrieve the bodies. A second adolescent bear was also slain a short time later when it charged at the park rangers. An on-site necropsy of Bear 141 revealed human body parts, such as fingers and limbs. The haunting incident was even partially recorded, which helped the investigators to place what might have happened to the unlucky couple. In the recording, we can hear Treadwell crying for help, but unfortunately, no one was around. Number 8. The fatal snake bite. Keeping a venomous snake as a pet, particularly a black mamba, is a risk very few are willing to take. Black mambas are infamous for their potent venom and aggressive nature, ranking among the world's deadliest snakes. A single bite can kill within hours if untreated, making it incredibly dangerous even for experienced owners. Alita Stacy from Putnam Lake, New York, however, had a deep fascination with reptiles and collected over 70 snakes, including a black mamba. Family and friends warned her about the dangers, but Stacy brushed them aside. Tragically, one day her boyfriend found her unresponsive, bitten on the forearm by her black mamba, which had somehow slipped out due to an unsecured enclosure. Despite efforts to save her, the venom's lethal effects were unstoppable. Later, all of Alita's snakes were placed in the Bronx Zoo, including the killer black mamba. Number 7. Monitor lizard horror. Ronald Huff's fascination with reptiles was intense, particularly his love for monitor lizards, creatures known for their considerable size and powerful claws. Some species are even venomous, and they're skilled hunters that can take down animals like kangaroos. Huff's friends and family were concerned about his choice to keep these lizards at home, but he was undeterred. After a few days of no contact, a worried neighbor asked the sheriff to check on Huff. When the officers arrived, they heard strange noises inside, but received no response. Upon entering, they were met with a shocking scene. Huff's lifeless body surrounded by his 7 monitor lizards, which had begun to feed on him. Investigators believe he might have collapsed from illness or injury near his pets, prompting the lizards to take advantage of the food source. Number 6. The Burmese python catastrophe. Exotic pets bring a unique thrill, but sometimes they come with risks that turn fatal. Jaron Hare and Charles Darnell, a couple in the United States, kept an albino Burmese python, a non-venomous but massive constrictor that reached 8 feet in length. Unlike venomous snakes, Burmese pythons kill by wrapping around and constricting their prey, and this particular snake lived in a makeshift cage held together by little more than a quilt and a few pins, an arrangement that would soon prove disastrous. Their somewhat chaotic lifestyle, including substance use, might have contributed to the lapse in securely containing the snake. One night in 2009, the The python escaped and slithered into the room of their young daughter. When Darnell found the snake coiled near her the next morning, he struck it in fury, but the tragedy had already unfolded. Darnell told deputies that he woke up in the middle of the night and found the python in the hallway, so he returned it to its 200-gallon aquarium where it spent most of its time. He thought he had secured the snake by placing it in a laundry bag with a small hole in it and then covering the aquarium with a quilt held in place by safety pins. However, Hare informed the deputies that the snake had escaped from the tank and laundry bag 10 times in the previous 2 months, and she was planning to create a locking lid for the tank. Florida state law requires owners to keep pythons secured under lock and key. Neither Darnell nor Hare had obtained a state permit to keep the python. Darnell mentioned that the snake was due for its monthly feeding, but he did not believe the animal wanted to eat the little girl. He said he stabbed the snake while trying to pry the toddler from its grip, but the child was already dead, according to the sheriff's report. The authorities later removed the python and took it to a United States Air Force base for training exercises. Hare and Darnell were ultimately held accountable and sentenced for 12 years for their reckless neglect. There were also reports that the couple, in their drug-induced frenzy, might have tried to eliminate their child. Number 5. The Wildebeest attack. Klaus Radant's love for exotic animals included keeping llamas, emus, reindeer, ostriches, and even a baby wildebeest on his property. As the wildebeest matured, its natural wild instincts began to surface, especially during mating season, making it increasingly unpredictable. On December 5th, 2004, Klaus's wife began to worry when he didn't return after lunch. Searching for him, she stumbled upon a horrifying sight: Klaus's body lying severely injured in the barnyard, evidently attacked by the wildebeest in a mating-fueled rampage. She hurriedly picked up her phone and called 911. Paramedics arrived quickly, but Klaus's injuries were too severe. They tried to retrieve him, but it was too late. The coroner reported that the wild animal apparently charged at Klaus multiple times before trampling him. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the chest and head. According to the police, the wildebeest's horns, which typically grow large and curved, had been cut down to the nubs. Number 4. The Cassowary tragedy. The cassowary, native to northern Australia and surrounding islands, is often dubbed the world's most dangerous bird due to its strong legs and razor-sharp talons. At 75, Marvin Hajos was known as a dedicated breeder of exotic birds, including cassowaries, emus, and ostriches, and even managed to successfully breed cassowaries in the United States, a feat that brought him considerable pride. One day, Hajos stumbled while near one of his cassowaries, startling the bird. The cassowary lashed out, delivering multiple deep wounds with its talons. Though Hajos managed to call 911, the bird aggressively blocked emergency responders from reaching him, delaying assistance. Sadly, Hajos passed away from his injuries, leaving his girlfriend traumatized. My understanding is that the gentleman was near the bird, and at some point, he fell. When he fell, he was attacked, Deputy Chief Jeff Taylor told the Gainesville Sun newspaper. A woman at the property, who identified herself as Hajos's partner, shared with the newspaper that he had been doing what he loved. Hajos sustained deep puncture wounds and slashing cuts from the animal's sharp talons, which severed a major artery in his arm, according to a recently released autopsy report. Diagrams detailing Hajos's injuries revealed more than a dozen lacerations across his face, neck, back, abdomen, thighs, legs, and right arm, including significant damage to his brachial artery, the primary blood vessel in the upper arm. Following the attack, the cassowary was sold at the Gulf Coast livestock auction. Hajos was not required to obtain a permit to breed these birds, which are native to Australia, New Guinea, and other South Pacific islands. Even after this tragic incident, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has not implemented any new rules or restrictions concerning the ownership of cassowaries. If the animals are being used for commercial breeding, they are considered domestic animals and aren't required to have a permit, explained agency spokeswoman Karen Parker. A permit would only be necessary if these animals were interacting with the public. In an audio recording of the initial 911 call, Hajos can be heard trying to provide his address to a dispatcher while pleading, "Would you send an ambulance, please?" His voice sounded weak and urgent. Unfortunately, those were the last words Marvin Hajos ever spoke. Number 3. The dangerous stag encounter. Though deer are often seen as gentle creatures, Gerald Rushton's experience with a 500-pound red stag showed the darker side of these animals. Rushton was feeding the deer one day when the massive stag suddenly charged at him, pinning him against a fence and causing life-threatening injuries with its powerful antlers. Rescue teams arrived, but had no choice but to put the stag down to reach Rushton, who sadly did not survive. It was known that Rushton was obsessed with domesticating the animals that could not be tamed, yet the deceased was interested in turning his home into a zoo. Along with this deer, there were various other types of deer present, including axis deer. The European red stag deer had a scary set of antlers and reportedly pinned Rushton against the fence before goring him and trampling him when he fell to the ground. Due to the aggressive behavior of the animal, it had to be shot before deputies and Texas Parks and Wildlife Department game wardens could enter the pen to remove Rushton's remains. Rushton was pronounced dead shortly after. Number 2. Wapiti attack. Australian resident Pat McDonald kept a wapiti, a rare cross between a red deer and an elk, on his property. One day, while McDonald was feeding it, his family heard him screaming. Rushing outside, his wife found him under attack by the aggressive animal. An ambulance worker nearby assisted, but McDonald's injuries were extensive. The wapiti had to be eliminated too. Number 1. The mountain lion crisis. Amber Michelle Couch, a Texas resident, kept a mountain lion as a pet, despite lacking the necessary permits and vaccinations. The mountain lion, confined to a cramped cage, became increasingly aggressive. Tragically, Amber's nephew wandered too close to the cage one day, and the mountain lion lashed out, causing severe facial injuries. Fortunately, he survived the attack. Authorities ultimately removed the mountain lion, citing Couch's failure to meet safety standards for exotic pet ownership. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.